better than your currency. Splurging millions, buying houses like Monopoly. Fucking 9 to 5, man, the money is a joke to me. Buying cryptocurrency, my money in the privacy.
Hey guys and girls, welcome to this week's episode of the No BS with Birchy podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Birch, and this is the show unraveling the truth about the facade of the 21st century. We're now exiting the matrix and waking up to motherfucking reality. Thanks a lot for tuning in again this week, guys and girls. Today I'm answering more questions in from you guys in the community, and got lots of questions. I literally got pages and pages of questions. I haven't even looked at the questions. I'm going to start from the top and read my way through and see how many we can answer in this week's podcast. So this first question here I've got is, my net worth is $17,000 short of $1 million. I have 5 properties, including my home, total debt of $730,000. My asset pool is $1.7 million, just turned 50. For the first time in my life, I'm having trouble financing another investment property. All properties are in my name only, with the exception of one, which is joint. I find this all very interesting. ANZ is the lender. Since since the Royal Commission, this has changed. Your joint property, we have to calculate 100% of the liability, only 50% of the income for a new loan in my name, so on and so on. By the way, portfolio is positive geared. What am I doing wrong aside from banking with the same bank? Look, there's many variables there. It's a bit hard to give some advice on this one, but firstly, congrats on being a millionaire, right? 17 grand short, here, there, if you put your property on the market, you've got 5 properties there, I'm sure that someone will give you an offer that's, 20 grand less, 20 grand more, you could be there, you're a millionaire. So congratulations on that position. And I guess as always, I've got to give a little disclaimer to everybody that's listening to this week's podcast. I'm not a financial advisor. I don't give financial advice, but I'm just a dude that owns a few hundred properties and, loves finance and financial stuff. So on, your portfolio, how to get over the banks, like I don't have the answer. Like in short, I don't have the answer because, there's lots of questions that are missing here. So the one thing I could direct you to is if you want to contact my team, 1300 367 925, or send us an email. My team can get a little bit more information and we can come back to you with a bit more clarity onto the answer, because we need to know more about what's the income, how much the rents on the properties, what the equity doing. Need to hone in as to why the bank is not lending to you. I think it's amazing that a lot of people, in their portfolios and in their journeys is hurdles. Like, this is totally off topic from your question here, but a lot of people come to us and they say, I want to buy a property, the bank won't lend to me. I want to do this, the bank won't lend to me. I want to do this, the bank won't lend to me. It's like, that's what you want, right? It's not what the bank wants. The reason why the bank's not lending to someone is because they're not getting what they want out of the deal. A lot of people think, they've got to go into a bank, take a gun, put a balaclava over their head and rob the bank. The bank actually wants to give us money. They're in the business of handing us money, right? They want to give us more money. They want to print more debt. They get paid when they print debt and you pay them interest on that debt. They make a margin. That's their business. They want to print a shitload more money, give it to you so you can go do whatever you need to do. So it's important to always, this is just for everybody out there, it's important to understand, what does the bank require from me to lend me more money? So whenever I get rejected, I always ask questions, how far do I fail servicing? It might be that you fail servicing by $200 a month. Well, we need to find an extra $50 a week. It's plugging the hole and finding out what the bank needs from you and then being able to provide it. I see people go in and they come to us where their portfolios are totally, messed up and they've got all these large debts on these largely negative geared properties or whatever, and it sort of gets them stuck. By the sounds of things, you've got a large property portfolio, you've got 5 properties, so you've got 5 properties with $1 million worth of debt. Having a 200 grand loan across 5 properties isn't much debt. You'd have 5 lots of rental income coming in from those properties as well, which would be great. You sound like you're in a good position for the bank, but it's just understanding what are the finer parts as to why. And don't be too caught up like whether you've got all your loans with one bank or whether they're with multiple banks. A lot of people come in and they go, I think I should diversify and be with 5 different banks with 5 different loans. It's not always the best to be with 5 different banks, because sometimes the banks will, favour you more if you give them all the business, and they'll, package your loans up to, you have a file, you have a profile at the bank. So if they lose your business, there's a retention area, and they're not in the business of losing business. So having more exposure to a bank can be negative, but it can be a positive. For me, I've always used a bank until they can't help me anymore, and that's when I go to the next bank. So it's just one thing. Don't beat yourself up on that. And secondly, you've got, by the looks of things, from what I can see here, is that ANZ is the lender. You're just talking about one bank. I've been told from heaps of banks to piss off and they don't want to lend me a loan. That's fine. I'll just go to the next bank. So just because one bank doesn't say that you can borrow a loan doesn't mean that there's not 50 other banks that are going to lend to you. There's not just 4 banks in the country. There's not 20 banks. There's not 50 banks. There's literally hundreds of different lenders that have all different terms, clauses, conditions that will lend to you. So just because someone says they're not going to give you some money doesn't mean that the next one's not going to. So being 50, congratulations, that's cool. You still got, the bank sides, they'll still lend to you for another 10, 15 years. So it's not your age that's an issue. Your asset position, you've got 5 properties, that's great. Sounds like you've got a half a good portfolio built there. You just need to build the other half, but you need the bank to lend you the money. So we just need to work out why the bank won't lend you the money, what the bank requires from you, and then working out a plan on how to keep the bank happy so they'll just keep giving you more money. It does sound simple, but that's the reality of what we need to do. So if you need help on that front, reach out to my office. I have a dozen brokers that help our community and help build the portfolios for the rest of our investors. So we're always here to help. Second question is, do you work with interstate investors or have staff in Western Australia? I work with people that are based all around the world. Doesn't matter if they're in Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth, New Zealand. I've got so many people in New Zealand. It's like I've never been out of the country. I'm scared of aeroplanes. 20 mil worth of debt, perfectly fine. Put me on an aeroplane, shooting bricks. Don't leave the country. But I do believe that there's a lot of people over in New Zealand that follow and watch and know what I do. But also I've got people in Singapore, Hong Kong, US, UK, Canada, all different nations around the world. So happy to help out wherever I can, all different areas, whether it be, building the portfolio, sourcing the properties, financing the properties, structuring it legally, accounting, got all the team that can help you in all different areas. In most states and cities, I do have staff on the ground, whether it be depends on what area of the business as well. Like I've got staff all the way along the coastline in Australia. So yeah, feel free to hit us up and see if we can help you out. Number 3 is, how does a free discovery session differ from a map session? Look, there's 2 different things. So you can contact my staff, chat with my team. Everybody's position is different. Generally getting started, speak with my team. They'll have a discovery session with you. They'll work out, you tell them where you're at, what you're trying to achieve, and, where you feel like you're stuck. I've got over 100 staff in my business, and my team will put you in contact with the appropriate people. Discovery session is just working out, where you're at and getting a bit of general sort of advice and guidance. If you'd like to, the difference from a map session to a discovery session is that a map session is conducted by myself personally. So you would be in a session with myself, generally by the phone, 99.9% of the time via the phone. We would have a chat just about your position, what you're trying to do, and work out a plan of attack on how to get there. So a map session is an hour with Birchy. A discovery session is, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour with my team, strategizing with them. So yeah, my team are experts at what they do. Some of my team members are responsible for building portfolios of 20 to 30 properties in 12 to 24 months. And I'm talking about in the current climate. I've got one investor that's got 26 properties. I spoke to him in December 2020 and now it's, August in 2021. So, that has been from the guidance of myself and my team. And it all started with the discovery session with that investor. So yeah. Fourth question is, how old is too old to start investing in property if you have $1 million in equity? Look, there is an old point, the point where the banks will stop lending to you. Like if you had $1 million cash in your bank account and you're 80 years old, you could do something with it. But if you're 80, right, I'm not trying to be a dick. If you're 80, it's a bit old, and I'd prefer to put you in contact with maybe a financial planner in my team to talk about utilising other vehicles such as investing that money via super, or investing that money in sort of intergenerational estate planning. So at the end of life, well over midlife, you can still plan. But I'd generally say up to about 60, 65 is about the cutoff point where investors that I work with, because getting loans from banks is a bit tough past that point, because the banks require a lot of extra support and sort of clarity. They've got a thing called responsible lending. So the bank, to lend money past the age of, I think it's 65 or 60 or 65, they want to know that if they're handing out a 30-year loan and you're 65 years old, by the time you pay out this loan, you're going to be 95, and you're probably not going to be working for 25, 30 years of that. So the banks have a thing called responsible lending, which kicks in around early 60s. So at that point, you would need to have some financial planning sort of sign off to qualify and tick the boxes with the bank. Generally, I work with people up to about 60, 62, 63 in their personal portfolio, and beyond that inside of their super fund and other sort of vehicles that they have. So it's not too young. The youngest investors that have got 18, like people come to us on their 18th birthday, they're like, fuck, I want to be like Birchy and buy a property on my 18th birthday. Let's get me sorted out. I want to get a loan, want to get a property, etc. And other people, can be at the other end of the spectrum. So it's never too young or too late. I've got some kids that are, 18, 19 that have got like 3, 4, 5 properties in their portfolio straight away. I've got, people that are, 50, 60 that are just starting out, and they're getting like 20 properties in 2 years. So, it's not too late. I think, and this is a bit cliche, I don't like using these people as an example, but if you look at like, the Colonel Sanders and Ray Kroc, they started their businesses when they were like 55 and 60. They were, well past the age of when you normally expect to, start a business. People normally look at retirement. These guys started their businesses. So it's not too late to get involved in something, but it's like the different risk profile and appetite would be different for someone at 20 than what it would be for 60, and the advice, the guidance, the strategy, and the outcome of the portfolio would be very different in each decade class of my investors. So a 20 years investor is different to a 30 year, 30 years different to a 40 year, 40 years different to 50 year, 50 years different to a 60 year. And at different stages, someone might be traveling, someone might be starting out their career, someone might be having a family, some people might have a family with more expenses coming in the following years. Some people might, everyone's position is different. So if you had $1 million in equity, you could do a lot of damage in this market. I've got the guy that I was mentioning of that got up to like 20 plus properties in 6 months. They've started with half of that. So if someone had $1 million cash, I think you could, the possibility is definitely there. As long as you can service, you can get the loans from the bank, depending on the age, etc. Someone with $1 million could build a 20 plus property portfolio within 12 months potentially. So there's lots of opportunities out there. Important to reach out to my team. Question number 5, Nathan. Obviously, the more property you purchase, the ATO wants their land tax. What are the strategies to minimise land tax? So looking at tax is a pain in the ass. I've seen all the scam emails that you've ever seen over the years. Great Nigerian prince email. I've seen all these different things. But the biggest scam I've ever seen is state taxes and just taxes in general. So, land tax, you are providing accommodation for someone, and that requires them to have a roof over their head. If it wasn't you providing that property, the government and the state would have to provide that housing for the person. So I find it, it is annoying having land tax, but does it determine or distract me from building a property portfolio? Definitely not. I just find different ways on, how to minimise that. So having a diversified portfolio. So I know people that have got 20 properties in their portfolio. They might own, there might be a husband and wife, and they might have 3 properties in Sydney each under the personal name. So there's like 6 properties because they haven't hit the land tax threshold. They're not paying land tax. And then they might buy 5 properties each in Queensland. So now they've got 10 in Queensland, 6 in Sydney. There's 16 properties, and they may not be paying any land tax. They might have 3 in Perth each. There's another, 6 properties. So you can actually try and minimise that land tax. In my position, I think I'm paying about $100,000 a year in land tax. It's absolute fucking criminal, the land tax bills that I got. But yeah, it is a part of the matrix. So yeah, there's ways to minimise. If you want to, speak to a tax strategist, there's all different types of taxes, whether it be land tax, capital gains tax, income tax. It's important to try and minimise it, but I wouldn't let it deter me from making money. Ultimately, you just want to be making bank and being able to reach your goals. So if you do need help, reach out to the team at One Path Accountants. Speak to Ridwan Hannon and the team. If you want, just reach out to the B.Invested team. We'll do an introduction. It is one of my businesses, and we'll be able to get you in contact with someone to try and protect you from the taxman, because it is a scam. Number 6, how long should you stay interest only for? Personally, I've always left my loans to be interest only when I get them. People say, I want to pay my mortgage off. Who wants to pay off debt at 1%? Once again, I'm not a financial advisor, but if I had $1 million loan and I had $1 million come into my bank account today, there'd be absolutely no fucking way that I'd be paying off my mortgage with it. Because if I was to pay out my debt, I'd just be saying I'm a shit investor that can't get better return than 2 or 3% than what the interest rate's costing me. I'd be rather expanding my asset base. If the market doubled and you had one property for $1 million and it doubled, that'll turn from 1 million to 2 million. And if you had the $1 million to pay out the debt, you've only got one hook in the ocean. If you had the same $1 million, you could keep the $1 million debt, go and buy another $1 million worth of asset. If that asset brings in 7% interest, a 7% return, that $1 million will bring in $70,000 a year. If your interest rate over on your $1 million worth of debt is $30,000 a year or 3% interest, you could take the $70,000 income, pay out $30,000 in interest, and you still got $40,000 left over. And you've got $2 million worth of asset that could double into $4 million. So for me, I'm not a big fan of paying down debt. If interest rates were 10%, I'll be thinking about paying down debt. But inflation can't keep up with the cost of money. So the inflation's always going to be running higher. So on that note, I'm not a big fan of paying off debt. So I've always left my loans as being like a 5-year interest-only period. And then after that 5 years, they go to principal and interest. And generally by that time, my rents have been pumped up. And then with the extra rental income that I've collected over the last 5 years, it might be positive $100 a week now. I'll just use that $100 a week to pay down the debt. And then in 20 years' time, 30 years' time, my property will be paid out. So I just normally leave them for 5 years. Leave it at that. Question number 7, how do the properties have so much equity so quickly? It's important when buying a property to buy it below market value. How do I determine what market value is? I try and use the same sort of tools the valuers use, and that's looking at recent properties that have sold and other properties currently on the market, and understanding what the value would be looking at with their data in order to do a valuation, and then sort of modelling the properties based on that. And sort of maybe I'd say about 70% of the time I can get equity within a 3 month to 6 month time frame. Sometimes I can get them within a week of buying the property. I can get equity out, and maybe probably like 30% of the time you might have to wait 12 months for that equity to transpire. So with it, it's just about buying the properties well priced and below market value. Question number 8. So the repayments need to be less than what you make in rent to be positive cash flow. No, it's not just repayment. So when I'm buying a property to be positive cash flow, I want it to be net cash flow. The difference between net and gross is, let's say for instance, you've got 100 grand, say a 200 grand property, and you're getting $200 a week rent on it. If the strata fees or the council rates are $200 a week, it's going to be negative anyway, right? So I want to make sure that the rent is positive cash flow after taking into consideration council, water, insurance, real estate agent fees, and insurances, and mortgage. I want those things all covered from the rent. If there's a positive cash flow, then I'll do the deal. And then the other aspect of it as well is also looking at the cash on cash return. So if you put down 50 grand as a deposit and you're getting back, $100 a week positive cash flow, that's 5 grand a year worth of income, and you've got a 50 grand deposit. So you've put 50 grand in, you're getting 5 grand a year back. This is a 10% cash on cash return. So you can expand and play around with the numbers as much as you want, but I want to make sure minimum that the property is covering all of its expenses. It's got its own heart, lung, respiratory system, and looking after itself. If I have to, put money in each week in any capacity, if you have no job, then you're not going to be able to pay for it. It's a very quick way to go bankrupt, is to have negative gearing and expenses that are just piling up every week. The question number 9 is, if you buy an investment property using equity as a deposit, doesn't that mean that LVR is 100%? Technically, yes. So if you go and buy a property, let's say for instance you buy a property for $200,000 and it's worth 250 grand, you buy the property, go back, pull out the equity, get 50 grand equity out, 80% LVR, meaning that you've got $40,000 back in your bank account. If you then use that $40,000 to go and buy another property as a deposit, that means that you've got an infinite return on investment because you haven't had to put any money down. You've used the equity from another asset to generate another asset. Kind of becomes like a babushka doll. So with it, I love that concept. And if I was to build my portfolio again, it took me like 5 years to understand the importance of using equity. I was a dumbass, and when I first started buying property, I listened to everyone around me. I didn't listen to everybody and everything that they had to say, otherwise I would have done half the shit that I did. But I was buying properties and I was saving up the cash deposit each time because I didn't even understand how equity worked. I thought you had to buy the property, pay off the debt, all that sort of stuff. It was only until I realised how equity worked and I was like, shit, this is the power of leverage. Question number 10 is, when holding a property over time, you have to renovate it as well. Can you talk about taking the equity to renovate to keep the cash flow going and rent increasing? That's a good question. So, like looking at my portfolio, like some of my properties I've owned for 15 years, 18 years, stuff like that. Like I've been investing for 18 years now, going on 19 next year. Fuck, I'm getting old. But with those properties, some of them I've never actually been into. Some of them I've never gone back to do work. I might have done a reno once or twice. I've done a little bit of work to them, but some of them I've never seen. Like I've literally never been to. So, and they just keep chugging along. They're perfectly fine. People are happy with the carpet. The people are happy with the paint. If I was to give it a new paint and a new carpet, firstly, would the people respect it? Secondly, would I get any more money for it? And I want to know when I'm doing a renovation that my asset is going up in value and it's going to have longevity and that it's going to be able to increase my cash flow. So if I was spending 10 grand of my money on a property, I'd want to see a return of say 20 to 30% per annum. Because if not, I could find something else that's going to give me a 20 to 30% return. And think about this, in life, right? Like there's not many places where you can get 20 to 30% return on investment per year return, right? You'd have to go and invest your money in the shares and maybe get 10% or 5%, and then you'd see the market drop next year by 5%, and then you'd be scared looking at it. You could buy crypto, which could go crazy, and your $100 could turn into $1,000 and then back to $10. There's lots of variables out there. But to know that if you had an asset that was returning, you bought it for 200 and it was renting for $300 a week, and if you could spend 10 grand on it, that means that 10 grand could get you an extra $50 a week. $50 a week times 52 weeks in the year would be $2,600 per year. $2,600 on top of 10,000 would be 26% return on investment. If your property was bought for 200, you could spend 10 on it. It goes up by 50 grand. You've already 5x'd your capital that you put into the deal because you've taken a little bit of money and expanded upon it by capital value. And then if you're getting a cash flow return of 26% return per annum, that's an amazing result. So if you're getting extra $50 return on a 10 grand reno, then that's okay. If you're spending 10 grand and you're getting $10 or $20 a week, $20 per week is $1,000 per year. $1,000 per year is 10% return. It's okay, but it's still not the greatest return. So I want to make sure that I'm getting bang for my buck when I'm doing a renovation. But ultimately, I want to make sure that I'm improving my asset base, and the asset base is growing up in value. So when I do renos on my properties, I don't just go, I either do a little bit of a patch job, and I just patch. If I'm doing a big reno, I'm going to go in there and do paint, carpet, kitchen, bathroom. I'm going to do the whole works, because what's the point of painting and then having shit flooring and good paint, or having good flooring, good paint and a shit kitchen? Like, I'd rather knock it all over at once and make sure that you're only sending the trades out there. Whilst the trades are doing the painting, they can do the kitchen. The house is vacant anyway, so get the kitchen installed at the same time. So you want to do things on quantity and scale. If you were using equity from your property to do the renovation, well, then it's not money coming out of your pocket. If you are paying a return, if you're paying an interest rate of 3%, if you have to pull 10 grand out of your property to do a reno, and you're spending 3% interest on it, that's $300 a year worth of interest. It's not actually that much. But if you're getting $2.5 grand a year back in rental income, that's 25%. You're making a 22% on interest on money that wasn't even yours to start off with. So, that's the power of property. People don't look about it. People don't talk about it like that. But the power of being able to leverage and create your own cash flow. Like, people have to go, oh, please, Mr. Boss, can I have a 2% increase in my wage? I promise you I will work like a dog, and I'll work, 20 hours a day. Just give me an increase, and you get 2%. Like, you have no control over that. Here, if you own the asset, you can then control what sort of income levels you get. And I always say, like, you should be constantly improving it. Like, I did a podcast beforehand, which was about improving, your life, 1% improving your life every day. If you can just keep improving your financial position, $10 here, $20 there, $10 here, $20 there, that all adds up. You can control your cash flow. You're not at the mercy of a boss or, whatever the case may be. Next question. When holding a property over time, that's the one I just read. Question number 11. What about NDIS property investments with high cash flow? Great. I've had a lot of people asking me these questions, right? Dog shit. Absolute dog shit. NDIS, dog shit. Is NDIS bad? No, I think it's great. People are contributing. There's a scheme out there to help disability. There is money to be made out of it. I'm not disagreeing that there's not money to be made out there. However, when I see all the properties that are being sold out there in the market from NDIS, they're all dog shit. They're the newest scam on the block. What other scams have we had? We've had NRAS, right? We've had these dual key properties. We've had all different types of, schemes that have come up over the years. I'm buying properties today that are NRAS, right? NRAS was a Kevin 07 Labor fucking scheme from back in, 10 years ago. And they basically said, if you rent your property for 20% less than market value, we will give you a grant every year of like 10 grand or 12 grand, whatever it is. So instead of renting it for 300, you rent it for 250 or 220, and you get an extra 10 grand a year. Everybody loved it. It was great. It was a great scheme. It was a great, amazing scheme in principle. But the problem is that all these fucking scammy, slimy salespeople, real estate agents, you can see them every time I go onto Facebook. I just feel like I'm seeing new ads for new gurus out there that are selling this off the plan garbage. They were selling fucking Amway 6 weeks ago. They were selling some other internet marketing a year before that. And now they're selling property as a property expert out there. And the shit that they are selling, they're getting paid. Whenever you see one of those NDIS properties that are being sold, they're getting paid like a $50,000 commission for selling you that dog shit. And the reason why I call it dog shit is that if a house in, let's call it XYZ suburb, whatever the suburb is, because I've seen lots of them, I've looked into it, a lot. I've had a lot of people bring them to me. A house might be selling for 600 grand and an NDIS one selling for $1 million. The NDIS one has got, fucking ramps and shit that you wouldn't want in your house anyway. So if you weren't selling that property to the person for the NDIS system, you would have to renovate the property to sell it to a homeowner, right? And who wants 4 kitchens in their house and en suites in every room and ramps going into their bedrooms? You need to fix this sort of stuff up to retrofit it back to a normal investor or normal homeowner. You're paying a premium, generally 40% over the top. When these things come in, when people are buying them, the valuations, every time I hear someone that's told me that they've been fucking caught up in one of these things, their valuations come in like $100,000 less, meaning they have to pull money out of an existing property to put into that. The properties are overinflated. So going back to my NRAS scheme, which is the thing we were talking about beforehand, which is a similar sort of scheme, and it's called a scheme, right? Like a Ponzi scheme, an NRAS scheme, an NDIS scheme, they're all schemes, right? It's funny. People ask me, are they good? The thing is that the NRAS properties, I'm picking them up today, endless amounts of them for like $200,000. They're 10-year-old properties. You couldn't build these properties for 200 grand. I'm picking them up for 200 grand. People paid 300 to 350 for them 10 years ago. Because they don't have the NRAS anymore, they've gone down. You've held the property for 10 years and it's less than what it was 10 years ago. So you've lost 100 grand on the purchase price instantly. You've held it for 10 years. You've lost money for 10 years and now you're selling it for 100 grand less. Really fucking great investment. So my buyer beware is that, do you want to be the person in 10 years time holding that bag? I see so many people getting caught up in it. Great, go do it. Get caught up in all the marketing, but look at the numbers and the numbers don't add up. It all sounds great, might look great on some little glossy slides, but if I could go and buy 2 houses in the same neighborhood for the same price as what I'm paying for that one and get the same rental income, I've got so much more value because I've got two houses, not one. It's overinflated. So there is a couple of people that have done NDIS, which is retrospect fit outs to a property. I know a couple of people that could have got 50 grand a year rent, but instead they're getting like 80 grand a year rent, and they've had a provider that's done it, and they've given them like free renos and shit like that. That's great. If you can find an NDIS provider that can add on to your existing property, I think that could be fine. But if they're selling you a new property that is an NDIS compliant one, well then you're paying a massive marketing fee for an off-the-plan. When I say buying off-the-plan properties are really bad, this is like the worst of the worst. That is my 2 cents. You've asked my opinion. That's just my thoughts on it. So hopefully that answers that question. And I'm going to answer one last question. I know I'm going on a roll here. Question number 12 is income the main criteria the bank uses for pulling out equity and servicing? What can we do if our income is capped at the moment? Are there ways around it, i.e. positive geared? The banks look at many different variables when approving a loan, and I can't give you the answers to it because every bank is different And every bank changes on a regular basis. For example, if you went and bought a property that's got a 50% return on it, right? Let's say it's a 100 grand property, rents for 50 grand a year, just making it up. Buy a property for 100 grand, rents for 50 grand a year, you take it to the Commonwealth Bank. Commonwealth Bank will say, well, we will only cap it at a 6% return. So instead of getting 50 grand a year, we're only going to take in 6 grand of that income because that's 6% of the 100 grand. And then the bank will value that down. So the income won't factor in that equation. But if you were to buy that property for 100 grand cash and then take that 100 grand cash property, you own it outright unencumbered, and then the bank was to then assess your loan based on the actual rental income because there's no loan attached to it, well, then the bank would take in 80% of the actual rental income. So it's how the loan is structured, how the property is structured, how the acquisition is structured, what the property is doing. So yeah, there is lots and lots of variables. It's very important on that front to make sure that you don't screw it up with buying properties. And a lot of people come to me, they bought 3 properties and they're like, how do I move forward? And it's like, well, we need to, massage this across the line and, get yourself back into, lending territory where the banks are going to love you. So yeah, looking at it, there is many, many variables. I've seen people get out. A lot of people come to me and they think they're screwed, but there's different ways that you can get yourself out of it. So this week's episode, we've got a little bit of homework here for you guys. So the question that I want to leave you with is, what 3 things, we're halfway through the year of 2021, what 3 things have you wanted to do this year that you haven't done? Or what are 3 things that you want to do by the end of this year that you haven't started yet? Write them down, make a goal, and reverse engineer it. So, whatever that goal is, whether it be a health target or a personal sort of wealth sort of target or a savings target or a property target or whatever the case may be, write that goal down and then reverse engineer and work out a plan on how you're actually going to get there. So what steps do you need to take? What things do you need to do in order to get to that position? So, it's easy to say, I want to own a property by the end of the year. Okay, how much will that property cost you? Then what sort of money do you need to save? What servicing do you need to save? What things do you need to do in order to be able to get to that goal? So, we can just end the podcast. We can say, okay, guys, I can give you a little spiel and say, like, share and subscribe. Or, you could actually take a bit of action in your own life, and improve your own personal life. So I'll leave that with you. There's thousands of you that are going to listen to this week. And, I guess the question is, next week when you listen to my next podcast, what steps have you taken in order to improve your life? Because there's 365 days in the year. And I know at least 350 of those days, I'm taking steps in order to improve and put myself into a better position to get to where I want to be tomorrow. So, what 3 things can you do to improve your life immediately? What steps can you take to improve your life immediately? I'd love to hear it, love to hear your story, even if it's just one person that we can improve their life of, that'd be amazing. So if you do need help, it's intricate sort of advice, you'd need to speak to a broker, maybe speak to myself, some guidance around the property aspects, etc. You can do so by admin@binvested.com.au. But yeah, here to help. So there's lots and lots of questions. I literally got 100 questions here, probably. They just keep coming through. I will make more of these. Keep the questions coming through to the team. And if you guys need help, you know where to find us. If you like the podcast, like the answers, please share us some love. Share it with your friends and family. Tag them on all different platforms. And make sure that you subscribe to Spotify, Google Play, and the Apple Store. We'll catch up soon for next week's podcast. Take care and keep being awesome. Bye for now.
Yeah, like Bilal said, man, we're stuck in the matrix. This my advice, don't care if you take it. The dollar about to die, soon to be hyperinflated. This my 2 cents, don't care if you save it. Joint be decentralized and you will see you've been lied to the whole time, and it's the irony. Cause cause they do the exact opposite. You become a slave to the system. Enough your money, all they do is profit. There's no conspiracy theory, you better hear me. Crypto will set you free before the system does. I don't care if you do or you don't, but what I'm saying is the truth to the reason you choke. I never been a failure, excuse my behavior. Keep talking, haters doing me a favor. They all telling lies, I know what they been telling you. I'm the opposite, the Donald Trump of Australia. It's amazing, here for the taking, my time is never wasted.